The city was a living, breathing creature of light and sound, and Adana moved through its veins like a solitary red blood cell. She was a woman with a universe inside her, a universe filled with swirling colors and shapes only she could see, captured in the sketches that filled her worn-out backpack. By day, she navigated the sun-drenched corridors of the Art Institute, her hands smudged with charcoal, her soul alight with creation. By night, she navigated the bustling, steam-filled kitchens of a downtown restaurant, her hands scrubbing pots, her mind focused on the simple math of survival. Each delivered order, each clean table, was a single brushstroke in the larger painting of her future, a future where her art would pay her bills. Across the city, in an office that seemed to float among the stars themselves, a man named Young Min presided over a different kind of empire. His world was not one of color and canvas, but of sharp lines, silent commands, and the heavy weight of legacy. The skyscraper was his castle, the men in dark suits who moved with quiet efficiency were his knights, and the endless flow of money was his kingdom's lifeblood. But kings can be lonely and thrones can feel like cages. His grandfather, a man etched with the stern lines of a past era, had issued a decree. The family line, a proud and unbroken chain, needed to continue. An heir was not a want, it was a necessity, a duty as fundamental as breathing. Young Min, however, had long since sealed his heart away from the messy, unpredictable business of love. He saw marriage and family not as matters of the heart, but as strategic alliances, as mergers. And so, he devised a new strategy, a corporate takeover of his own bloodline. He would find a woman, intelligent, healthy, resilient, and he would make her an offer. It would be a transaction clean and simple. A contract for a child. Their worlds, so distant they should never have touched, collided on a Tuesday evening. Adana, her legs aching from a double shift, had one last delivery to an address that made her whistle low under her breath, the towering Min Corporation headquarters. She'd never been inside, only ever glimpsed its shiny exterior. The lobby was a cavern of polished marble and silent, serious people. She was given a special pass and directed to the top floor. The elevator doors opened not into a busy office, but into a private, terrifyingly quiet foyer. Hearing voices from a slightly ajar door, she assumed it was the reception. Pushing it open, she froze. This was no break room. It was a vast, minimalist office where a dozen men in impeccably tailored suits stood in a semicircle, their attention fixed on the man seated behind a massive, dark wood desk. Young Min. His eyes, dark and impossibly sharp, lifted from his papers and locked directly onto hers. The room fell into a silence so profound she could hear the frantic beat of her own heart. The other men turned as one, their expressions unreadable, their postures stiff. Adana felt like a rabbit caught in a ring of wolves. I'm so sorry, she stammered, her voice a fragile thing in the heavy air. Food delivery. I think I have the wrong floor. She turned to flee, but a voice, calm yet absolute, stopped her. Wait. Young Min stood up. He was taller than she expected, his presence filling the space around him. He dismissed his men with a slight flick of his wrist, and they filed out without a single word, leaving the two of them alone. He walked toward her, his steps silent on the thick rug. He didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze sweeping over her, not with the leer she sometimes endured, but with the analytical focus of a man assessing a unique and unexpected asset. You are lost, he stated, his voice a low rumble. Yes, sir. The lobby said the penthouse. For a Mr. Kim. You have found him, he said. He took the bag of food from her trembling hands, his fingers brushing against hers. A simple, accidental touch, but it sent a jolt like a static shock through both of them. He looked at her name tag on her delivery jacket. Adana. He said her name slowly as if tasting the syllables. A beautiful name. He didn't say anything else. He just looked at her, and in that prolonged silence he didn't see just a delivery girl. He saw the defiance in her eyes beneath the fear, the strength in her posture, the unique beauty in her features. He saw a candidate. Days passed. Adana tried to forget the strange, intense encounter, chalking it up to a bizarre moment with a rich, powerful man. But then the car arrived. A long, black, silent vehicle that pulled up right outside her tiny apartment building. A man in a suit got out and politely but firmly asked her to come with him. Mr. Kim requested her presence. Fear warred with a strange sense of curiosity. What could he possibly want? She got in the car. She was taken not to the office tower, but to a stunningly modern house, all glass and sharp angles, that seemed to hang over the city lights. Young Min was waiting for her in a sparsely furnished living room. He was dressed more casually, but he was no less intimidating. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. I have had you looked into, Adana, he began, his tone matter-of-fact. You are 24. An art student. You work 2 jobs. You send money home to your mother. You have no serious partner. Your health is excellent. A cold dread trickled down her spine. You've been spying on me? I needed information, he replied as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I have a business proposal for you. He gestured for her to sit. She remained standing, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I need an heir, he said, the words stark and unadorned. A child to carry on my name. I'm not offering love. I'm not offering romance. I am offering a transaction. You will live here with me for 1 year. We will try to have a child. In return, I will pay every single one of your student debts. I will ensure your mother is comfortable for the rest of her life. And when the year is over, if you wish to leave, you will do so with a generous sum that will allow you to paint for the rest of your days without ever worrying about money again. The room seemed to tilt. Adana felt the air leave her lungs. It was the most outrageous, the most insulting, the most terrifying thing she had ever heard. Her first instinct was to yell, to throw something at his calm, handsome face, to run out of this glass prison and never look back. But then the other part of her, the practical, weary part that knew the exact weight of her debt and the fading hope in her mother's eyes, began to calculate. A life of freedom. A life for her art. All her problems solved. The cost was her body, a year of her life and a piece of her soul. No, she whispered, her voice shaking. That's insane. I'm not a breeding animal. You are a woman with dreams that are currently out of reach, he corrected her, his voice still calm. I am a man with a problem that needs a specific solution. We can help each other. Think about it. You don't have to decide now. He handed her a simple, thick white card with nothing but a phone number printed on it. My private line. You have 48 hours. The car ride home was a blur. For the next 2 days, Adana was a storm of conflict. She cried. She was angry. She felt sick. But she also found herself staring at her half-finished paintings, at the stack of bills on her counter, at the picture of her mother. The offer was a monster, but it was a monster that held the key to her cage. On the final evening, her phone buzzed with an alert for her student loan payment. It was the final nudge. With hands that trembled, she picked up the white card and dialed the number. It rang only once before he answered. Adana. She took a deep, shuddering breath, steeling her voice, finding the core of strength that had always kept her going. I have conditions, she said, her tone firmer than she felt. My own rules. A pause on the other end. State them. You will never raise your voice to me. You will treat me with respect as a person at all times. And you will not interfere with my art. If I agree to this bargain, my mind and my soul still belong to me. There was another long silence. She could almost hear him thinking, reassessing the woman on the other end of the line. Agreed, Young Min said, a faint note of what might have been respect in his voice. I will send the car for you in the morning. The transition from her own noisy, cluttered world into the stark, soundless expanse of Young Min's home was a shock to Adana's system. It was not merely a change of address, it was a migration to a different planet, one with its own strange gravity and atmosphere. Her new room was a masterpiece of minimalist design, all neutral tones and sleek surfaces, a room that seemed to have been staged for a magazine rather than lived in. The bed was large enough to get lost in, the windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city she could no longer afford to be a part of, and the silence was the loudest thing she had ever heard. There were no creaking floorboards, no distant sirens, no hum of a neighbor's television. It was a silence that felt heavy, expensive, and profoundly lonely. Their initial coexistence was a carefully choreographed dance of 2 solitary ghosts passing in the hallways. They shared meals at a table so long it could have seated 20, sitting at opposite ends, the clink of silverware on porcelain echoing in the vast space. The conversations, if they could be called that, were functional and brief. The car will be ready at 10. The chef has prepared fish for dinner. There is a business dinner on Thursday. Your attendance is not required. He was a man of few words, and Adana, stubborn and proud, refused to be the one to break the quiet. She felt like a piece of furniture he had acquired, a living, breathing asset he was storing until she fulfilled her purpose. Her days took on a strange, suspended quality. With her debts paid and her job no longer a necessity, she had the one thing she had always craved, endless, uninterrupted time to paint. Young Min had converted a sun-drenched room on the east side of the house into a studio for her, stocked with every supply she could ever dream of. It was a cage, but it was a gilded one with perfect northern light. Yet, the first time she stood before a blank canvas in that sterile room, her inspiration fled. The pressure of the transaction, the coldness of her surroundings, seemed to freeze the vibrant colors in her mind. She felt like her creativity was a bird that had flown into a glass window, stunned and unable to find its way. It was on one of these frustrating, paintless afternoons that she ventured deeper into the house, exploring the territories beyond her assigned bedroom and studio. She found a library, a room of dark wood and leather that smelled of old paper and polish. Her fingers trailed across the spines of books she did not recognize, in languages she could not read. And then, on the mantelpiece, her eyes caught a simple, silver frame. It held a faded photograph of a young boy, his smile wide and unguarded, standing between a handsome, smiling couple. The man had Young Min's sharp jawline, the woman his dark, intense eyes. But their eyes were different. They were warm, crinkled at the corners with genuine joy. The boy in the picture was a version of Young Min she could not reconcile with the man she knew, a boy who looked loved and capable of love. That night, unable to sleep, she wandered down to the kitchen for a glass of water. A sliver of light bled from beneath the door of his home office. Pushing it open quietly, she found him there, not working, but simply sitting in his large chair, staring into the darkness beyond the window. The photograph from the library was now on his desk, held in his hands. "You should be asleep," he said, his voice low and weary, not turning around. He had a preternatural awareness of her presence. "I could say the same to you," she replied softly, stepping into the room. She gestured to the photo. They were beautiful. He was silent for a long moment, his thumb stroking the glass over his father's face. "Their car went off a bridge in the rain," he said, the words stripped of all emotion, as if he were reciting a fact from a history book. "I was 10. My grandfather's way of grieving was to teach me that emotion was a liability. That love was a vulnerability our enemies could exploit." He finally looked at her, and in the dim light she saw not the powerful Mafia boss, but the lonely 10-year-old boy from the photograph. This house has been quiet ever since. It was the first true thing he had shared with her, a crack in the impenetrable fortress of his persona. Adana did not offer empty words of sympathy. She simply stood there, sharing the silence with him, making it a little less heavy. A subtle shift began after that night. The next day he was waiting for her at the breakfast table, not at the far end but in the chair right next to hers. He asked her, "What are you working on in your studio?" It was the first time he had inquired about her art, about something that belonged solely to her. The question unlocked something in her. She began to talk, tentatively at first, then with growing passion, about her creative block, about the struggle to find her voice in all this silence. To her astonishment, he listened. He didn't just hear her. He listened, his full attention on her, as if her artistic struggles were as important as his corporate mergers. Later that week, emboldened, she invited him into her studio. She showed him the canvases she had brought from her old apartment, works filled with bold, vibrant colors and dynamic, almost chaotic energy, a stark contrast to the monochrome world he lived in. He walked slowly from painting to painting, his hands clasped behind his back. "These are full of feeling," he observed, stopping before a large piece dominated by swirling reds and golds. "This one is angry." "It is," she admitted, surprised he could see it. "I painted that after a day where everything went wrong." He pointed to another, a softer composition in blues and purples. "And this one? That one is peaceful. It's how I feel when I listen to the rain." He turned to look at her, a new, profound respect in his gaze. "You put your entire heart on the canvas," he said. "That is a brave thing to do. I spend my life ensuring no one ever sees my heart." The space between them in the large house began to shrink. A conversation started in the hallway would continue over dinner. They began to eat together, not out of obligation, but out of a budding desire for company. He started telling her small, amusing anecdotes about his day, and she would talk about an artist who inspired her. Laughter, a sound the house had likely not heard in decades, began to occasionally ring out, tentative at first, then more freely. The first touch that was not an accident happened in the library. She was reaching for a book on a high shelf, and he was beside her in an instant, his hand covering hers to guide the book out. His skin was warm, his grip firm. They both froze, the simple contact sending a current through the quiet room. He didn't pull away immediately. His dark eyes searched hers, and for the first time she saw not calculation but a deep, yearning curiosity. He slowly lifted his other hand and, with a feather-light touch, traced the line of her jaw. Was a question. Her slight, almost imperceptible lean into his touch was her answer. That night he came to her room. He didn't speak. He just stood in the doorway, a silent silhouette waiting for permission. She, standing by the bed, her heart hammering against her ribs, nodded. He crossed the room and his lips found hers in the darkness. This kiss was nothing like the cold transaction they had agreed upon. It was slow and deep and searching, a conversation without words. It was a confession from a man who had forgotten how to speak the language of tenderness, and an acceptance from a woman who was discovering a new dialect of her own strength. Their intimacy from that night on was transformed. It was no longer a clinical step in a business plan for an heir. It became the place where all their unspoken words gathered. It was in the way his hands, which she had only ever seen sign documents or give commands, now learned the geography of her body with a reverent slowness. It was in the way she, who had entered this bargain with her guard at its highest, found herself letting those walls crumble, revealing a capacity for trust and passion that surprised her. In the darkness of her bedroom, the silent house finally found its voice. It was in the whisper of sheets, the soft exchange of breaths, and the quiet, desperate way he would say her name, Adana, as if it were a prayer he had just remembered. The bargain was still there, a piece of paper lying in a drawer somewhere, but it was beginning to fade, its ink slowly washing away in the rising tide of something real. The change in the house was as profound as it was silent. It was no longer just a structure of glass and steel, but a home breathing with a new, tender life. The quiet was no longer empty, it was peaceful. The spaces between them were no longer vast and cold, but intimate and warm. Adana's paintings, once bold with anger and frustration, now bloomed with softer hues and hopeful, flowing shapes. Canvases of brilliant gold and serene blue began to lean against the pristine walls, little pieces of her soul slowly colonizing his sterile world. Young Min, in turn, began to leave traces of himself for her. A book he thought she'd like on her bedside table, a playlist of gentle music that filled the studio, the simple, enduring fact of his presence, not as a warden but as a companion. It was on a perfectly ordinary morning that the extraordinary revealed itself. Adana, feeling a strange, fluttering fatigue, finally took the test she had been both dreading and secretly hoping for. When she saw the result, the world tilted on its axis. The two pink lines were a verdict, a promise, a terrifying and wonderful future all at once. She walked into the dining room where young Min was reading the news on a tablet, his brow furrowed in his usual concentration. She placed the test on the table in front of him. He looked down. The furrow in his brow deepened, then vanished. His face, usually a masterclass in controlled neutrality, went through a rapid, unguarded series of emotions. Confusion, dawning comprehension, shock, and then, for one breathtaking second, a flash of pure, unadulterated joy. It was there and gone so quickly she might have missed it, but she saw it. He stood up, his chair scraping softly against the floor. "It is done," he said, his voice low and strangely formal. But his eyes, fixed on her, were saying something else entirely. They were wide, almost vulnerable. He reached out and his hand, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he placed it over her still flat stomach. The gesture was so possessive, so protective, and yet so full of awe, that Adana's eyes filled with tears. The heir had been secured. The bargain was technically complete. But in that silent, charged moment, they both felt the terrifying truth: it was only just beginning. The joy, however, was a fragile island in a sea of peril. Young Min's world was one of shadows and rivalries, and a new heir was the ultimate prize and the ultimate target. A man named June, a rival who had been nursing a grudge for years, saw the potential vulnerability. He saw Adana not as a person but as a key to unraveling young Min. One afternoon, as Adana was returning from a checkup at the doctor, a car swerved, forcing her vehicle to the curb. It wasn't a violent attack, just a menacing block. A man got out, tapped on her window, and when she rolled it down terrified, he simply smiled a cold, thin smile and said, "Send our regards to Mr. Kim. Congratulations on the blessing." Then he drove away. It was a message clear as a shard of ice. That night, young Min was a storm. The gentle man who had traced the lines of her paintings was gone, replaced by the cold, formidable boss. He paced his office like a caged tiger, his rage a palpable force in the air. When Adana came to him, he turned on her, his eyes blazing with a fear so deep it manifested as fury. "This is what I feared," he snapped, his voice cutting through the room. "This is the vulnerability. You are a target now. Both of you. It is not safe. Perhaps it would be better if you left. For a while. Until the baby is born. Until I can deal with this." His words were a physical blow. To be sent away now, after everything, felt like having her heart ripped out. But instead of crumbling, Adana felt a fierce, maternal strength ignite within her. She walked right up to him, into the heart of his storm, and placed her hands on his chest, feeling the frantic, terrified beat of his heart against her palms. "You listen to me, young Min," she said, her voice quiet but steely, her gaze holding his without a flicker of fear. "You hired a woman to give you an heir. But that woman is gone. I am not a pawn in your business. I am the woman who loves you. This is not just your child. It is our child. And we do not run. We face this together. Do you understand? Together." The word loves hung in the air between them, a truth finally spoken aloud. It shattered the last of his defenses. The anger drained from his face, leaving behind a raw, unvarnished terror and a profound, overwhelming love. He crumpled, pulling her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I cannot lose you," he whispered, his voice ragged. "I cannot lose either of you." It was the confession of a man who had finally found something worth more than his legacy, something worth his very soul. The resolution was swift and decisive. Young Min, with the cold, brutal efficiency of his world, handled the threat from June. It was not a topic he discussed with her, and she did not ask. The shadow was simply gone, the air cleared. Peace, hard-won and precious, settled over their home. A week later, he took her to the private garden that bloomed on the rooftop of their home, a secret oasis he had built for his mother long ago. The city glittered below them, but up here, among the fragrant night-blooming flowers, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. He turned to her, his hands holding hers. "Adana," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Our story began with a bargain. It was a contract written in ink, for an heir, for a solution. It was the worst and best deal I ever made." He dropped to one knee and her breath caught in her throat. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning, simple diamond that caught the starlight. "But my heart has written a new contract. One not for a year but for a lifetime. Not for an heir but for a partner. Not for a solution but for a love I never dreamed I would find. I'm asking you now for a new bargain. A bargain for forever. Will you marry me?" Tears of pure joy streamed down Adana's face as she looked at this powerful, lonely man who had learned to love again because of her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "Yes, I will bargain with you forever." Their forever began not with a grand wedding, but with the quiet, daily miracles of a life built together. Their son was born with his father's serious eyes and his mother's bright, curious spirit. The silent house was now filled with a symphony of new sounds. The gurgling laughter of a baby, the gentle rustle of pages as Adana read stories aloud, the low, rumbling sound of young Min's genuine laughter, a sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Her paintings now told a new story, one of deep, abiding love and fiery, protective strength. The cold, glass house had become a warm, loving home, a testament to a most unusual beginning that blossomed into the most beautiful of endings. A business deal had become a life, a bargain had become a forever. Did Adana and young Min's journey from a cold contract to a warm family capture your heart? If you want to be swept away by more stories where unexpected beginnings lead to forever love, subscribe to the channel for your next romantic escape. Your next favorite story is waiting.